item 1, apology substitutions.
Convener, there's no...
We better stream it.
Sorry. John, could you start the live stream, please?
Right.
Thank
Apology
you.
substitutions, Karen.
There's no apologies intimated. I think everybody's in attendance, Convener.
Yeah, thank you. Declarations of interest. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Just item 13, report 18321. I'm a council appointed director of Angus Alive and will stay in the chamber, so to speak, and discuss that item. And
thank you. Minute of the previous meeting. Is that a correct minute? Oh, sorry, Councillor Devine.
A declaration of interest, the same one as Councillor Duff, specific exclusion as a member of the board for Angus Alive. We'll stay in.
Anyone else? Right. Minute of the previous meeting.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Is that agreed? Thank you.
Agreed.
Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. Can I ask Stephen Wood and Scott Gibson to present their paper?
Good afternoon, and thank you, Convener. Before I ask members to scrutinise, question and note the Q4 report, I would like to take a moment to inform members of an upcoming public consultation that the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service are running. The first of these is on the future vision for the service, which outlines the long-term strategic vision, and this is due to launch next week. And following that, there will be a consultation on how we respond to unwanted fire alarm signals. And this is due to commence on the 19th of July and run for 12 weeks. I'll ensure the committee have details of both the consultations once they welcome any responses that you choose to bring forward for those. If I may, Convener, I would also like to respond to a query that came up at the last committee on the fire at the Cameron House and the preventative work being undertaken within Angus. Are you happy for me to proceed with that now?
Yes, carry on.
Thank you. The committee will be aware of the tragic incident at Cameron House and the outcome of the recent prosecution, which followed an extensive multi-agency investigation into the circumstances which led to the fire in 2017. An employer of Cameron House Hotel pled guilty to offences under the Health and Safety at Work Act and received a community payback order, and the operators of Cameron House pled guilty to offences under the Fire Scotland Act, receiving a fine. Now, compliance with both of those pieces of legislation is to varying degrees the responsibility of the duty holders and employees within the premises. But the Scottish will probably be aware the enforcing authority for the Fire Scotland Act, and we undertake a programme of fire safety audits to assess compliance within non-domestic premises. And whilst we have enforcement powers in relation to the Act, the main purpose of the audits is to inform and educate duty holders in order to enable them to comply with the legislation and ultimately keep the public safe. The audit programme is a risk-based programme and it considers factors around the size of the building, building use and occupants, as well as historical incident data. And whilst the audit framework is a national document, there is within it considerable scope for local direction. And I've used this scope to direct our local enforcement team to undertake a thematic audit programme within Angus, which will focus on premises providing sleeping accommodation and particularly within older buildings. And Cameron House incident notwithstanding, this is particularly relevant at this time as the hospitality industry seeks to open up and will have many challenges to face around risk assessments, procedures and finding appropriate staff. So we will endeavour to support them through that and ensure the safety of the public that resort to those premises. And then on a national level, incidents are reviewed on a continuous basis to learn lessons and help build how factors can combine and result in the consequences we saw at Cameron House. And this work feeds into the training of our new officers and also into the ongoing of our training of our existing staff. So hopefully this local approach underpinned by the national resources give you some comfort around the prevention work that's being undertaken currently within Angus, and hopefully that answers the previous question from the last committee meeting. I'd like to now ask members to move to the performance summary on page 14 of your pack. This provides both the Q4 figures for the 12 headline indicators which support the 6 priorities in the local fire and rescue plan for Angus, and it also provides the provisional figures for the 2020-21 fiscal year. You will note that the majority of the indicators are on target or below target, and I will ask Group Commander Scott Gibson to provide further detail on these before we take questions towards the end of this. So Scott, if you could carry on from here, thank you.
Thanks, Stephen, and good afternoon, everyone. As per usual arrangements, I'll talk through each of the bullet points on page 15 of your report pack and the performance highlights. This sets out the key successes and challenges that we faced during Q4, which we're asking the committee to note. Following this, happy to answer any questions as per usual arrangements. So first of all, if we look to bullet point 1 and 2, we'll see that there's been a slight decrease in the numbers of accidental dwelling fires during Q4. This has been a trend over the last few months and again is welcomed. The target for accidental dwelling fires was reduced for 2021 in line with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Performance Management Framework, and we've managed to meet that target, which is good to see. The incidents themselves were mostly involving cooking and someone elderly that was involved, and also some were smoking related. Because they're dropping in general accidental dwelling fires, it's having a positive impact on keeping the number of fire-related casualties low as well. In fact, people and households are actually better prepared for fires in the home due to the extensive work that we do carry out with our home safety visit programme and the partnership working that we've built up over the past few years. We do have good referral pathways in Angus, which is reassuring, that target target the most vulnerable within our communities, and a lot of this good work can be seen in Appendix 1 of your report pack in the fire report that happened within Q4. COVID is still impacting on our face-to-face interactions with some residents, but we'll continue with those that are most at risk and remotely advise the remainder. We've now extended into the rural areas and started working in conjunction with the Angus Rural Library to try and target the home safety programme out with the towns in Angus and more in the rural areas. And we'll continue to try and escalate this as we move forward. Moving on to bullet point 3, we've only non-domestic building fire during Q4, which is below average. These types of fires continue to be low within Angus, just because of the fire safety management arrangements within non-domestic buildings, and generally that are of a good standard. We do get assurances of this through our building standards colleagues and our fire safety audit regimes. We'll have managed to complete our framework audits that Stephen alluded to earlier for this year by the end of Q4, which is good considering the impact that COVID has had on us. Referring to bullet point 4, I've highlighted the numbers of road traffic collisions during Q4, which were mainly around the Kirriemuir, Arbroath and Forfar areas. There were no fatal casualties during Q4 and 9 non-fatal casualties, which is slightly above the average. However, 5 of these were from one incident. I'd like to provide a little bit more context around the other special services we are increasingly involved in surrounding Priority 3. Away from RTCs, there were 64 other special services in Q4. Over half were effecting entry and assisting other agencies, predominantly where there was concern for the occupier. There were also several flooding incidents, with the remainder being made up of acting as a first responder and other rescues from things like lifts and carrying out animal rescues. Moving on to bullet point 5, I've highlighted the unwanted fire alarm signals incidents that were down again in Q4, which is great to see. However, with a hint of caution, without knowing what impact COVID's had on this. The service, as Stephen alluded to again, are keen to reduce our attendance at these incidents and reduce the road risk and maximise the time for other types of work that we are currently engaging with stakeholders in. We're very much focused on reducing these and working with the premises that have persistent call-outs. In addition to this, but again, throughout the pandemic, this has been a challenge. And Steve mentioned the national work that's going on in the consultation surrounding that. Referring to bullet point 6, I've highlighted the increase in deliberate fires over the Q4 of this year, along with an increase in our deliberate secondary fires. There continues to be a large portion of these on the Angus-Dundee boundary, and we're continuing to work with partners to try and drive these down. We carry out youth engagement. We're carrying out youth engagement work in both the Forfar and Ardroth areas, where most other deliberate fires are occurring within Angus. And we're working with Police Scotland to identify offenders at specific incidents who we can work through with our Fire Setters initiative. We've also managed to get education packages onto the school's education online services to assist. And while numbers in Angus are relatively low in comparison to other local authority areas, it is the one area I would like to see reduced further, as we have failed to achieve the targets that were set at the start of the year. COVID's proved very restrictive, as we all know, with our face-to-face interactions, but hopefully we can make an impact on this as we move back to normality in the coming months. Finally, referring to bullet points 7 and 8, I'd like the committee to note that although during Q4 we have faced difficulties regarding training of staff, we've managed to ensure our crews are continually prepared for the role, continued to risk assess premises that are high risk remotely, and continued to adapt our way of working in line with government guidelines. And we've also supported the LRP throughout the pandemic, offering up services required and trying to support the communities where we can. With some restrictions easing, we hope to be able to increase our face-to-face presence within communities and support them through to the recovery and beyond. I draw your attention to Appendix 1 and 2, which provides some detail on the work we are carrying out with the most vulnerable within our areas, and also some of the good initiatives which have been recognised through our Strategic Leadership Awards, like the one highlighted at Carnoustie. Thanks for listening, and happy to accept any questions.
Thank you, Scott. Right, normal procedure, bids for questions, page numbers, please. Councillor Miles.
Yes, it's really refers to mostly.
Okay, Councillor Whiteside.
Page 25.
Councillor Brays.
Yes, again, a general question, perhaps best left to the end.
Okay, that everybody? Okay, Councillor Miles, page 14.
Sorry, were you speaking to me, convener?
Yes, carry on.
Yes. So sorry, you went dead there, and I didn't hear what you said.
That's okay.
Okay. First of all, congratulations. The figures that are highlighted on page 14 really show that think you're getting on top of things, with the exception, obviously, of the deliberate fires, which is disappointing. You highlighted the home safety visits are paying off. In this COVID situation, are you still able to do these, or are you having to wait until the kind of restrictions ease before you can continue with a lot of these home safety visits? Because as it's been seen with the figures, it is paying off. And while I'm on here, just with the disappointing deliberate fires being started, are the perpetrators being identified and being caught? Because that obviously plays a large part in whether they continue or not. And lastly, before I forget, it is very pleasing to see the drop in unwanted fire alarm calls, because that's been a problem for many, many years. Thank you.
Scott?
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Thank you. I'll address the home fire safety visit question first. Yes, this year has been particularly challenging, as I'm sure we've all found it. We have moved between various levels of restriction throughout the year, but at all times we have been able to provide a service fitting smoke detectors where people have none, and where we identify very high risk people within the community, we have been able to support them also. I think Scott referred to the national campaigns. Hopefully people are aware of the Make the Call campaign, where we've identified a sort of key demographic within the community that we're focusing on. We've also produced an online home fire safety questionnaire to support people, which is a sort of interactive thing, and it produces a bespoke report to the individual, and we've pushed that quite heavily, although we do seek support in getting that to the people that need it most, who very often aren't the ones that engage online. And finally, we have our crews making contact. We still go through our pending list, and where restrictions and levels have been at a point where we haven't been able to make contact physically, we've phoned people, and we've gone through a short 5-step questionnaire just to keep fire safety measures at the forefront and to provide advice where possible. With regard to your second point around the deliberate fires, I think I might leave that one for our Police Scotland colleagues with regard to the apprehension of any perpetrators of those fires. But I know we've done extensive work both in Dundee and in Angus around multi-agency information, leaflet dropping, and we're now in a position where we're starting to be able to get back into schools, and we're looking to programme that in, albeit I know the schools are under a lot of pressure around exams at the moment, but that work is starting to ramp up, and we were helped for a period there when the weather turned a bit colder and wetter. And then on the final point with regard to UFAS, I've noted down UFAS. I can't remember the exact point. Could you refresh me, Councillor Miles?
Yes, I was just pleased to see that has been a perennial problem, the unwanted fire alarms and the high incidence. And it's very pleasing to see these numbers are dropping now, because it's taken a long time. But if there's any reason that they are dropping, it'd be interesting to know.
Yeah, I think I would love for us to be able to take credit for a little bit cautious around the amount of activity within business and industry over the last year, although other areas within Scotland have seen slight rises. So I think probably a combination of some businesses sort of mothballing for a period, as well as the work that we're doing in terms of educating. Hopefully the consultation that brings forward will continue to accelerate that work. But yes, it is gratifying, but unfortunately I'm cautious about what might come when all businesses fully open up again and systems that haven't been used and tested. So that's a focus for our enforcement teams, just to support businesses through that stage of easing of lockdown. Thank you, Councillor Miles.
Okay,
Thank you for that.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, it was good to see the successes in relation to many of the targets, but I just wanted to dig down into the information about the deliberate primary, if I could. It's obviously disappointing to see so many of them still occurring in Monifeith and Sidlaw ward, and I just wanted a little bit more information about whether the majority are within the old Strathmartin Hospital grounds or they're just spread through the area generally. And one of the reasons I ask is because I know that the owners had been contacted reasonably recently to try and get them to improve security around the site, and I don't know whether that's taken place or not. But just to see whether the problem is across the ward or specifically in that spot. Thanks.
I'm happy to take this one, Stephen, if you wish. Thanks, Councillor Whiteside. What I would say is, having done quite a lot of fact finding around the figures within Angus, yeah, I would say the majority have been in that border area, not within the Strathmartin Hospital grounds as such now, because as you say, that site has been secured. We do periodically send crews up to check the access into the site and report back on any security issues that they see. I believe they've got a security guard in place on the site now. However, when we look at the deliberate fire figures, the majority of them are within that sort of ward area, that crossover ward area. We have been doing a number of patrols with the community wardens and going out and trying to get our presence seen in the area. And I'm sure Wayne will come back and maybe talk about the apprehension side of things, but we have been working with Police Scotland quite a lot in that area, and putting a lot of effort into trying to reduce the numbers within that area. So hopefully that answers your question, but happy to take anything else.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thanks, Scott.
Councillor Brace, you had a question?
Convener, and thanks to Stephen and Scott for the report. Yes, this report, as always, does concentrate on the priorities, and rightly so. You did touch, and it's in the report, about some of the other stuff you're doing too. And I wondered if you could maybe expand a wee bit more on what other stuff you do. And so, to give you an example, do you still get called out to go and extricate small boys from school railings and that sort of thing? What other sort of things do you find yourselves involved in?
You want me to take this one, Stephen?
Scott, yes, I'm happy for you to take that one.
Thanks, Councillor Brace. Yes, so as you know, we report on the road traffic collisions within, I think this is the area that you're talking about the unintentional harm. So I would say that in recent years, the number of road traffic collisions has reduced quite significantly, and we are finding ourselves increasingly going to other types of incident within this priority, such as I alluded to with the assisting other agencies. We do still turn out with some of the incidents you mentioned there. Simple things like with people with rings stuck on fingers. It may sound trivial, but we do have the equipment to help in those situations. And also when somebody gets caught in rails, we do have the equipment that we can remove somebody from that. So yes, there is quite a lot of other types of incidents that we do attend that we'll have, but just because we'll have the skill and the expertise and the training and the equipment to assist. But we will turn out to any humanitarian service where possible and do whatever we can in support of that. I don't know, Stephen, if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Councillor Brace, the type of incidents we go to, nothing ever surprises me. I think the traditional, more comic ones, they still all exist, but increasingly we're trying to have a much more targeted and focused approach to prevention. The skills that the crews get now around rescues from height, water rescue, the extensive home fire safety visit, and that will move towards a more all-encompassing safe and well visit in due course. The personnel have all undergone training recently on a more advanced fire alarm system that we can now fit that interlinks within the property, so you'll get an earlier warning rather than just the old single point detector. So the more traditional stuff, it still exists, it still comes in, but we're overlaying that with a much sort of wider community focused and intelligence led approach to try and really around prevention. I hope that answers your question, Councillor Brace.
Yes, it does indeed, and thank you very much for that. I would just add, prior to lockdown and COVID, I attended a school visit at Aberlemno, and the fire service just happened to be there that day too, doing a visit, and the absolute excitement and joy of the children was it was a joy to behold, and I look forward to you getting back out to schools and getting on with that very important work too. Thank you.
Just while we're dealing with that, Stephen and Scott, it's not that long since the fire and rescue service were made a first responder for defibrillator kits and that sort of thing. Is that becoming an important part of the call-outs, or is it just something you do as part of the other call-outs?
Thank you, convener. We certainly the nature of the call-outs around special services is becoming far more multi-agency. We do respond much more often with paramedics and provide that initial response where required. There is a national work stream going on at the moment trying to widen out how we respond to cardiac arrest, but that work's still ongoing. And then with the defibrillators, just as a community fire station, we happily host those. We have them available there. But yeah, that's all part of the sort of strategic vision that we're trying to lay out, widening our role and becoming a more complete part of the community safety landscape.
Yes, I'm just interested in that because I had a personal experience in Miami where I collapsed the DVT, and the first responder was the Miami Fire Brigade. So that was my experience of dealing with that. Okay, anything else on item 4?
Yeah,
Sorry? Okay.
I was just going to say a very different model there, Councillor King, but we do look across the world, learn from them, and it's certainly something that's being looked at within the sort of strategic echelons of the service, and it's becoming increasingly to the fore, the type of work we do there.
It's very different. The first words from the fire service officer that tended to me was, "Don't worry, sir, this is a free service." So I think that says it all for the American system. Right, okay, if there's nothing else on that one, do we agree to note? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Fine, thank you. Let's move on to item 5, the police report. Wayne, I don't see Andrew Todd in the meeting. Is he missing?
No, I'm here, Councillor.
You're there, are you? Good. That's good, thank you. Right, in that case, can I ask you to present the fire report, please, Andrew?
Yeah, no problems at all, Councillor. So just before I present this plan or this report, I just wanted to touch on the unprecedented nature, obviously, of the last 12 months, not lost on anybody. I don't need to go into detail around it. But the purpose of touching on it here is just to draw members' attention towards some of the figures and the challenge of those figures comparing to previous years because of the unique nature of what we've got. So for yourselves, there's clearly the challenge will be an assessment of what can be understood from comparing the year just past, which is within the report, with previous years. And I would draw members' attention more towards the value of the 5-year reports and how 5-year averages and how important that is. But that's not to undermine the excellent work of the officers and staff within Angus and all that they've done over the last year, not just in regards to the COVID scenario, but also just in regards to general criminality, vulnerability and other calls for service which have carried on unabated right across the Angus area. So I just wanted to make sure that members were aware of the uniqueness of that as it affects our statistics, because it clearly absolutely has. The report itself, as members will know, gives us our local priority and how they tie into national outcomes across the wider Police Scotland, but also how they tie into the Angus Community Plan to make sure that we support not just our strategic objectives as an organisation, but also that our local objectives are aligned to our responsibilities to support the Angus Plan. I won't go into any detail on the figures themselves. Members have the report. It is quite lengthy, and I make no apologies for that. I think it's helpful to give as much information as we can up front, and then obviously welcome any questions. And as we move through any questions, I'll ask Wayne just to comment upon the fires, as Fire and Rescue have mentioned. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Is it Wayne going to carry on from there? Sorry?
No, Chair, I was just going to take it straight to questions. Thank you.
Take straight to questions. Sorry, I didn't pick that up. Okay, bids for questions, please. Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, convener. Thanks for that, Andrew. I was just going to touch on the
Page number, Beth.
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. Page 44.
Anyone else? Councillor Bell.
Pages 51, 58, 60 and 64, please.
51, 58, 60 and 64.
64. Yeah.
Councillor Devine.
37, 41 and 53.
Councillor Laurie.
64.
Councillor Braze.
Page 69.
Councillor MacDonald.
Page 50.
Okay, right. Let's start off with page 37.
Okay, thank you, convener.
Councillor Devine, please.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew and Wayne. And I think we do really appreciate the amount of work that the police have been undertaking through COVID in all sorts of different ways from normal, as well as your routine tasks. I know that there must be quite a bit of stress around there. I'm looking at page 37 on the antisocial behaviour side of things, which has increased overall. I keep on wondering why we just don't have ASBOs in Angus. It's quite a few years since we've had any ASBOs, and some from constituents seems quite tricky, quite dangerous in some ways. So I know that it's quite difficult to get residents to phone the police when they maybe should be doing that, so that you are well aware of what's going on. But I just come back to my question about the ASBOs, please.
So I'll ask Wayne to comment in a moment just around what we're doing in regards to antisocial behaviour. I'm in regards to wider antisocial behaviour, this is a question I field a number of times, and I think it's a very legitimate question, and I welcome it. But one of the challenges we have is antisocial behaviour is often just criminality, and we can deal with it. So violence or a breach of the peace or racial conduct, it can all be considered antisocial behaviour, but they're all substantive crimes in their own right. And we deal and investigate and report and feed those into the criminal justice system so that measures can be taken against the offenders. So for me, there's often an extent of misunderstanding that because we don't use antisocial behaviour legislation against antisocial behaviour, it might present as though we're not using all the tools available to us. But in actual fact, we're using common law crimes and common law powers, which gives us a lot more authority to deal. So I do try and make sure that we separate out the antisocial behaviour and the criminality so that people understand the effort and energy that goes into that. Clearly, ASBOs in themselves aren't a quick or cheap option. And we need to be very clear. We don't use them extensively anywhere. We never have, and we need to be very clear that that's the best use of effort and time to mitigate the challenge that might exist. And in actual fact, there may be other measures that can exist. It's not to denude the value of antisocial behaviour orders, but I say they're not the panacea of a quick win. And in fact, they're anything but that. But I'll ask Wayne just to touch on some of what he's been doing, but I wouldn't comment on local authority matters. I would leave that for them, and as they are one of the agencies that lead on the ASBOs, it would matter for them to comment perhaps on some of the wider issues if councillors have those. Wayne?
The antisocial behaviour, obviously, we're actually in a pretty good place apart from the absence of ASBOs. We have monthly meetings with all the housing associations, all Angus housing as well. There's a gentleman for the Preventions Board that sees us. We're in a very good place in the properties, identifying the properties and the individuals that are causing us issues. So we're not issuing ASBOs as such, as the Chief Super's pointed out. It can be a very long-term process to get an ASBO, and it's costly. But we do obviously get people to sign up on acceptable behaviour orders, or if they're not agreeing, an unacceptable behaviour notice. It's at least it ties them into something they're under no doubt about what the outcomes could be. We've started a review about the antisocial behaviour strategy across, where all the partners have got involved in 2 meetings so far, and antisocial behaviour and ASBOs is a focus, a partnership approach to that. And I would be loath to comment on an ASBO because, to be honest, I've never seen an ASBO right through as well. So I do know they're time consuming and very costly. But we're in a pretty good place, other than you're seeing no ASBOs getting submitted.
Okay, thank you.
Fine line. We continue with you on page 41.
Well, yes, it's a wee bit more of the same, really, but it's vandalism in Forfar, and we know we've had a lot of problems down round about the old leisure centre, and I know that there's been a lot of work gone in by the police and youth workers and wardens. I just think it is vital for us to make sure that it's safe down there, because we have that caravan park, which is so important to the economy of Forfar. You know, they come here year after year, they spend money in Forfar, and we don't want anything to happen down there, which is difficult. So I would really ask that this is quite a priority for police in Forfar.
Well, thank you, Councillor. I mean, we recognise the impact that vandalism causes. That's why it sits on our control strategy for the last year. We do welcome the reductions in the vandalisms, but it's not lost on us the impact it has on economy and people's feeling of confidence within their community. So noted, thank you.
Can I just come in on the back of that one? We seem to have a major problem in the Angus area of large groups of youths congregating, and we've had the instance of major damage at a fruit farm on the outskirts of Arbroath where a fire was started. It's all working around about the same sort of thing of unruly behaviour and you know, criminal damage. Would you like to comment on what you're actually doing on the ground to combat this? It might be one for Wayne rather than you, Andrew.
I'll ask Wayne to come in a minute, but what I would say is just from a strategic perspective, we walk a very delicate line, you know, and councillor, with the utmost respect, large groups of youth gathering I welcome. You know, these are children to an extent that have been locked in their homes for the last year. The challenge for us is that their unruly behaviour and how we manage that. And what we don't want to do is drive a wedge between us and our young citizens within our community. So for me, we need to make sure that our moves in this space don't stigmatise youths for gathering and congregating in open space, which is exactly as we would want them to do. But what they do need to do is understand their roles and responsibilities as active citizens within their community to behave themselves. And that's not just sits with the police, sits with parents and carers and others within civic society. But actually on the ground itself, I know Wayne has a lot of work ongoing in that space, and I'll ask him just to comment on how he's supporting some of the activity there, please.
The incident you're actually talking about, obviously that area is well known to us and it has been for a number of years. So the community teams are well tied into the owner of that property. And we're there and we're aware at the same time every year he suffers the same problem. So it's not that we're not there trying to give him as much support as we can. When the crime is committed, and in case of when you're talking about, yeah, we're investigating it, and I think we have identified a number of the youths that were responsible for the criminal damage. As the Chief Super points out, it's not ideal that we're having to probably charge children, but it's an area we work through all the time, and we know we're going to get the same problems this time of year. May, June, it rears its head again, but it's on the horizon. We're there all the time, and it's nothing new to us. We're just unfortunate the damage they caused the last time.
Okay, thank you. Right, next one is Councillor MacDonald, page 50. I beg your pardon, Councillor Whiteside, page 44.
Thanks, convener. The figure that popped out to me was the increase in the fraud relating to the increase in acquisitive crime relating to fraud. Obviously, a 97% increase. I know there's an awful lot of publicity around about this and a lot of multi-agency work to, trying to prevent worrying to see this figure. I'm just wondering how much of the fraud detected results in loss, or is quite a lot of it caught before it gets to that stage?
So there's quite a lot in that one, Councillor, and members might recall I previously spoke about the change in the recording system, which I don't like to use as some sort of excuse, if you pardon the phrase, around why the numbers increased previously. So last year was the first year in which all crime where the victims resided in Scotland or resided in our locality were recorded as crimes here. Previously, if the fraudster was in another territory, so be that England or Russia, South Africa, makes no difference, then the crimes would be no crimed in our country. And you can imagine how much confidence we would have about them being investigated in some of these jurisdictions, but we had no authority. So the counting rules changed, and so what we're probably getting now is a far more accurate understanding of fraud, and actually it allows us to better focus on the victim. That's coupled with clearly an increase in fraud over the reporting period as a consequence of lockdown. There has been an uptick. We know that nationally, and it is a real challenge for potential victims to protect themselves because of the ingenuity and the persistence of some of these fraudsters. So our challenge locally is to try and target hardened potential victims, as opposed to spending too much effort and energy actually chasing the offenders. Once we know the offender is out with our jurisdiction, we'll leave that with the national organisation, one of the strengths of Police Scotland, to coordinate and plan how they might deal with that. And we can see some successes across the UK recently of work in that regard. So it's not to suggest that we don't investigate. We locally might not, but nationally we absolutely do, and internationally clearly as well. So Wayne's team spend a lot of time, and I'll ask him just to touch on some of the work that he has done, spend a lot of time making initial inquiries into frauds, assessing what we think the likelihood is of the actual perpetrator residing in our jurisdiction, and if that's not able to, package the material off to the national, and then look at what more we can do to support the victims. Your question around do the victims lose? Generally speaking, yes. They'll lose their identity, they'll potentially lose money, and it's difficult, of course, to contextualise that, because a small amount of money to some people is an extraordinary amount to others, and the reverse is also true. We have seen large sums of money. but we do have excellent relationships with banks, and clearly there's a lot of corporate responsibility on some service providers around how they actually look after their customers to make sure the customers aren't being scammed by all this activity that's going on. So I'll ask Wayne just to touch on some of the bank protocols as to how we can intervene in that, and anything else he wants to add. Thank you.
I think it's pretty well established that the bank protocol in Angus is working really well. I think we've had a number of successes where we've stopped vulnerable victims losing vast amounts of money, and I can only encourage the banks to keep doing it. The worst that can happen is we come along and say, no, it's genuine, and then, okay, let's put the transaction through. I mean, locally now, we've probably set aside 2 or 3 officers in the last month to look at the frauds. That will relieve some of the workload in the frontline officers just now, and we've got more time Monday to Friday to get the bank details, see if we can package stuff off, either to other forces in England or move the stuff on. It might reduce our numbers. It could reduce some of the numbers because it's given officers more time to look in it, and they become specialised. We've had some inputs from the Specialised Crime Division as well, just to explain how you investigate a fraud, because it's new to a lot of officers. So that's the way we're taking that forward here. I just remind people that when a bank phones, they'll never ask for your full account number. They'll never ask for your PIN number. HMRC don't text you to say you've got a tax rebate. It's this stuff they do not do. So people have just got to be mindful. And if they don't trust someone, hang up. Go and find out from someone if it could be a fraud or that, rather than trusting everyone. It's just people have got to be a little bit more suspicious when they get these kind of offers. Nobody's going to ask you to go and buy Amazon vouchers because you're due a rebate for something. And people have just got to remember that kind of stuff and question stuff, because the worst that can happen is you'll get a phone call back or a letter.
Okay, fine, Beth, fine. Councillor McDonald, page 50.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, just looking at the road safety enforcement work, as someone that the A92 travels through their constituency, and it's probably the road I drive the most when I go and get my shopping and stuff, it's been amazing, the visibility on the route, and it seems to be having an impact on, well, certainly having an impact on driver behaviour, because you're actively seeing it. So I think it's really good to see, you know, that come forward, because it's one of the most frustrating complaints that we often get in, is the old one of you never see the police, which, you know, I always back because it's not true, but it's one that you've definitely seen on the A92. I've just got sort of question on that. Some of the places that the police officers sort of stand, there's obviously set places along the road. I've been picking up a bigger caseload of issues at Muirdrum again, and the junction that's actually in the village. Is there ways that the officers sort of can do sort of both sort of ideas, where they could monitor the junction in Muirdrum as well as the speeding on the road? Or is that something that would be set to 2 different sort of departments within the force, if that makes sense? I'm not really sure how that sort of works. So if I was to raise an issue with the junction in Muirdrum again, who would look at that? Would it be officers, you know, on the beat kind of guys, or would it be the road policing unit?
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, the simple thing is to raise it with Wayne by letter as to what the issue is. What we can do is we might ask local officers to pay some attention to that. We might ask our roads policing officers to pay some attention. We might work together. We might even do a site visit with the local authority, with the roads engineers, and see if there's something we can do. Our approach here is always, you know, that education, engineering, and then enforcement, because a continual enforcement's an unsustainable position to be in. So we always look at those, but leave that with our judgment as to, just dependent upon the description of the problem provided to us, we can make the best assessment of how we might respond to that. Because road safety isn't a purely police function, as we know. You know, colleagues in fire and rescue, colleagues in the local authority, as well as ourselves, all have a role and function and desire to see accidents come down. Our premise tends to focus quite rightly on reducing the number of killed and seriously injured accidents. That's where our focus is, and trying to reduce those is where my priority will always lie. I respect hugely the demand that sits on councillors around the annoyance of cars and the antisocial behaviour element of them, and I respect that, and we do need to build that into our plan somewhere. but not at the expense of allowing killed and seriously injured accidents to go up. But therein lies the professionalism of Wayne and his team to make those decisions about where are we going to focus the effort today and tomorrow on the issues. So best thing is just to let us know, and we would just respond to it with the appropriate response based upon what you've told us.
If I could come in on that, it's always surprised me that once we opened the dual carriageway as the A92 and the A92 main road no longer passed through the middle of Muirdrum village, that the Forfar-Carnoustie road was not made the main road, with the junctions being moved onto the access from the village. It's perhaps something that should be looked at by the traffic boys on their thing, because if you're going across that bridge heading for Forfar, coming down from Forfar towards Carnoustie, across the road through Muirdrum.
Convener, can I come back in?
Yeah, sure.
Just on that point, that's actually one of the reasons I brought it up. It's been raised a few times and with officers, and I believe the council's done what it can. It's just that we've now got cars flying through that junction again.
Yes.
And it being a real issue for the villagers. So that's why one of the reasons why I raised it here today, in light of the statistics on page 50, well, the information on page 50.
Well, I think the advice that you've got to write a formal letter to Inspector Morrison on this, and I would copy that to our roads engineers at the same time, because all of that is within our jurisdiction. Right, okay, next person is Councillor Bell, page 51.
Yes, thanks, convener. I wanted to pick up on Operation Close Pass. You said the project had mixed reviews. I've heard nothing but positive reviews about what you've been doing. All the cyclists that have contacted me about it have been really pleased. There's a big push towards extending active travel across Angus, but particularly in my ward, because as we know from any local, national or international surveys, it's fear of other road users that puts many people off cycling. I just wondered if you had any detail from the West Midlands experience around the long-term and sustainable driver behaviour change following Close Pass, and any accident reduction stats that persuaded you that this was a good idea. I would just like some more detail on that, please.
No, thank you. In regards to the first point, I'll need to come back to you. The short answer is no, I don't have that information, but we'll arrange for our roads policing colleagues to see if there's anything available to us that we can share with you. The second one's actually the most interesting element for us. So members may know that I wasn't too quick to launch Close Pass into the wider Tayside area, across all three local authorities, not because it wasn't valuable. It takes a significant amount of resource, and we don't have a KSI, a killed and seriously injured statistic, that says that we have injured cyclists as a consequence of Close Pass events. So that in itself would suggest, well, why are we putting the resources to that? And that was why my view was I needed to put the resources elsewhere, be that, Muirdrum Junction or other areas where we're trying to reduce killed and seriously injured. However, the pandemic's changed a lot of that, because it's quite clear that the mobility of people on bikes is dramatically increasing. And whilst we don't have history of it, what we have got very clearly is a risk.
In the meeting.
There's a really clear risk wrapped around.
You can come around about an hour or so. Right, okay. Cheers, thanks, bye.
I'll carry on, Councillor. So we've got a very clear risk of close pass events, and because we know that the most vulnerable road user group is our cyclists, and certainly the most recent data that I've been looking at is it's a vulnerability that we're not reducing. So we've reduced the vulnerability on motorcyclists, we've reduced the vulnerability on pedestrians, children, such like, but we're not reducing the vulnerability on pedocyclists. So there's a very clear focus. But what that leads into is the final point of your question is, how do we evidence the success of this? Because we don't have a KSI problem to reduce. What we're trying to do is stop one from starting. So that's the challenge that we'll have, and every officer that we put to that event when we run them is at the cost of something else. But as I said in my previous answer, therein lies the skill of policing. We need to balance those matters out. But I'll ask Wayne just to take a note of speaking to the roads policing colleagues to report back on any lessons learned around the sustainability of the West Mids originality of this 5 years ago. So thank you.
Got that.
And actually, if I could come back in on that then, Andrew, that, you know, maybe more public awareness around that would actually help reduce the fear that people have around cycling on the roads. If they are safer than people perceive them to be, that's a really positive story, and would really support our ambition for more active travel across the county.
Councillor King, I think you're on mute again, sorry.
Got another phone call.
Oh, back on mute.
Right, am I staying on mute this time? Yes. Right,
Fine.
Councillor Devine, page 53.
Yeah, Convener, I was going to ask a question here, but I'm actually not now. But what I would like to do is go back to the fraud, because this morning I got a text message and it was Census 21. I think this is a fairly new scam, but it's saying that you can be fined £1,000 for not responding to Census 21. Now, there isn't a Census 21 in Scotland. It's been put back to next year. There is a website which people are being encouraged to go on to, and I would just encourage people to delete the whole thing, but maybe to report it to the police.
Could I suggest that you forward that one to Inspector Morrison and let him pass it down the fraud line?
Well, I spoke to Trading Standards this morning, and I think the national fraud line is aware of it, but it's fairly new.
Yes, but I think it would be useful if you passed it in so it could be passed into the police fraud team.
Yeah, okay.
Is that okay, Inspector Morrison? Wayne, are you with me?
Sorry, there was a fire alarm test and I had to mute. Sorry, could you just
Okay, sorry. What I'm suggesting is Councillor Devine has received a text, I think it was this morning, or an email about Census 21. I'm suggesting that she forwards that to you so you can pass it into the fraud team.
The councillor reporting it to Trading Standards in the first instance is the best thing as well, to get that message out. Again, it's another one we can publicise that people know just to delete that.
Right, okay, that's fine then. Right, who's next? Councillor Bell, page 58.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And on the fraud note, I got 2 HMRC tax fraud scam phone calls yesterday within 10 minutes of each other. Right, on the domestic violence stats there, I take on board the points that things didn't manifest themselves in the way we kind of expected during lockdown, but just a reminder, I think, that crimes reported are the tip of the iceberg, and so much more happens. It doesn't reach the police. So my questions are: do we still have a domestic abuse liaison officer based in Angus? And also, the report mentioned that service provision is being monitored via the Angus Violence Against Women and Girls Partnership. And I just wondered if that was a route that is gathering a more holistic data set around prevalence of the problem, not just the reported crimes, because I think that is actually quite an important measure. And I just wondered if that can be included at some point. I fully appreciate that there is a national deficit around a full data set on this issue. I just wondered what we could do in Angus to address some of that on a partnership basis, and what services are being monitored through the partnership, as mentioned in the report. Thanks.
So thank you, councillors. As it happens, I chair the Angus Chief Officer Group by rotation, took over from the Chief Executive at the start of this year, I think it was. So I'm very well cited on the multi-agency approach to adult protection and all the challenges we have wrapped around domestic violence are in there. So we have been looking at this very closely because it's such a hidden crime. We know that it's just a truism across public protection that we don't get told on the first occasion these things happen. We get told at the end when multiple incidents have happened. It is a multi-agency response. It is victim focused. There are times where the police won't be told something that another agency will know because that's the will of the victim, and we need to respect that. What that presents to us, of course, is challenges in regards to that perpetrator potentially finding a new victim to perpetrate future criminality. So we have a number of tactical options available to us. Some of them are decisions that we might want to disclose to the new partner, what it is that their current partner's previously been involved in, even although there's no information that that new partner is a victim of criminality, but they might be at risk. We'll share that information. That's enshrined in legislation. It's not a simple thing to do, but we do it a lot across the Tayside area. I'll ask Wayne just to touch on some of the local work that goes on in his area, but you asked about the domestic abuse liaison officers. As it happens, we made a decision at our senior management team meeting last week to increase the number of domestic abuse liaison officers. I'm not going to give the figure out at this meeting in public. I don't think that's helpful, but what we are doing is we're increasing that number. They aren't dedicated to an individual local area. We need to have the flexibility across the wider Tayside because a lot of our partners, particularly health and such like, work across the area. And we also want to provide the flexibility and support, but our ambition is to align a domestic abuse liaison officer, at least one within each local authority area, so that we can continue to build those bridges and to that specialism. And they're supported by that specialism within the wider division. So I have an inspector, detective inspector, that manages this portfolio for us as a division and leading up into the detective superintendent, and obviously there's a dotted line to Wayne to make sure the focus and attention is in the right areas. So it is a huge area of important developed area around partnership. It's well governed and well cited through the chief officer group structure through our public protection arrangements. But on the ground itself, I'll just ask Wayne if he wants to add anything about the work that's going on locally.
Obviously, when COVID first hit us, we had to stop some of the stuff we were doing, but we still continue victim and perpetrator checks. So twice the victims visit to make sure that they're safe and well, and secondly, if the perpetrators are on bail, to make sure they're not breaching the bail. We also have a number of officers that are domestic champions across the locality in Angus. So there's maybe a couple of community officers in each locality for our both Montrose that are taking further training to be domestic champions, and they'll tend to get involved in the higher risk victims across the local authority area and support them as best they can.
Okay. Right, it's you again, Councillor Bell, page 60.
Thank you. Sorry about this, guys. Yeah, it was helpful to see the continued section on hate crimes, and I really would be hopeful that that could continue. And again, I guess it's only the tip of the iceberg, and I would be really keen to see more people coming forward to report crimes, because some of those zeros there just don't ring true to me. I can't see that's the case. So I'm encouraging people to come forward with confidence about being taken seriously. I'm curious to know how many of the incidents here were actually third-party reports, and you also mentioned the keep safe premises. We have asked before for a list of those and would appreciate seeing those if you can, for the Angus ones particularly. I think it's important, and it would be really helpful if we were able to encourage other premises to take part in that scheme as well. So happy to do anything to help on that.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not sure why we've not shared the keep safe data. I won't commit to providing it if I don't know why we haven't done that already, but it would seem sensible that we would do so. So if you can leave that one with me, I'll come back to committee. In regards to maintaining the data in here, yes, that will be maintained in there. I don't think Wayne will have the information to hand around how many of these are third-party reporting, but we'll test them and see, but I would be quite surprised.
Given the numbers we had in that fourth quarter, I would have been fully aware if there'd been a third-party report, and when it wasn't. It was all direct from complainers.
Okay. I just think we need to keep encouraging more people to come forward and to tackle it in an appropriate way when it happens. I think the figures are low. That's just my feel. So anyone who's listening or who knows someone who's affected, I would just really be keen to say to people, please come forward. And I think there is an issue in people not recognising that they've been subjected to a hate crime, and awareness raising around that, I think, is important, and we can also play in that. So thanks for that.
Okay, Councillor Laurie, page 64.
Yep, thank you, convener. Police officers in places like Dundee and Glasgow are starting to carry naloxone kits so that they can respond to opioid-related overdoses. This marks significant progress in our efforts to reduce preventable drug deaths in Scotland. Are there plans to roll out naloxone kits to police officers in Angus? And if so, when can we expect to start seeing this?
Thank you, Councillor. So the naloxone rollout isn't actually as it's described. It's a test of change. There are 3 pilot areas within Scotland that the Chief Constable has agreed to roll out the test of change. So Dundee being one of them. That will run for 6 months, and an evaluation will be made at the end of that period as to whether or not it's been a success, and that we would roll it out further. As Divisional Commander, I'm absolutely supportive of it. It's a piece of first aid equipment. We think nothing of giving an officer a bandage or a defibrillator outside a fire station that we can go and grab if we need. Why would we not have this within our community? But it needs to justify the investment in training, and it needs to actually stand up to the scrutiny that will follow the test of change. What I can say is that since we started the training, and it's just about finished just now in Dundee, over 90% of the police officers in Dundee have taken it. It's voluntary for them to join the test to change. And if I recall correctly, we've administered more than 1 a week so far, where officers are finding people in a state of unconsciousness or other way as they present, and they can then administer the naloxone to them. There's a huge amount of support from the ambulance service wrapped around this as well, so that when the officers administer naloxone, they phone the ambulance direct, notify that they're going to do that. It's clearly a life and death situation potentially, so they deploy immediately to that. And we are finding that the ambulance are attending at just almost at the same time as the police officers have completed the administration. And so far, my view from a local perspective from the Dundee side is that it's working very well, but it's very, very early days of quite a comprehensive test to change and evaluation. So it's unlikely, based upon what I know, that we rolled out further within Scotland until that test to change is complete. But what I would say is that officers who are in Dundee that are perhaps came out to Angus for an event or an operation or for an inquiry will continue to carry their naloxone. So there will be a bleed effect at the edges, undoubtedly. So if you're in, the east end of Dundee and there's a call for an unconscious person in Montefisk, nobody's going to say you don't get to go. Police officers, the nearest police officer will go. So there will be an effect for neighbouring local authority areas around Dundee that could fall out from this.
Okay, Ben. Okay, also on page 64, Councillor Bell.
It's okay, Councillor Laurie took my question, psychically intuited it, and Councillor Speed and I have both been trained in naloxone and carry our own supply. So if anyone's interested, let me know and I can pass you on.
Right. Last one that's got a page number, Councillor Braze, 69.
Yes, thanks, convener. A very, very quick the fraud first. Scam victims lose identity and maybe their money, but they also lose their self-confidence. And that can be hugely damaging, I think, particularly for vulnerable people when they're being asked to adopt and adapt to new ways of working, which they may already have great anxieties about. But my question's about wildlife crime on page 69, specifically about hair coursing. Now, I note that there have been 5 reported incidents during the period, and I just wondered if there have been any apprehensions and/or prosecutions related to those incidents.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll ask Wayne to respond on that. And Chair's discretion, I'll perhaps just ask him as well, given that's the last question that we have, just to comment on the fire and rescue point around the...
It's not the last question. There's another 2 hands up for those that haven't given page numbers.
Well then, off pass to Wayne then.
Simple answer for the last quarter, yes. There's been 2 apprehensions but no prosecutions yet. Now, obviously the court is a wee bit slow and there's backlogs in that, but we did put 2 people to the court under undertakings to appear because it's obviously treated very seriously.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, right. Now, the ones that hadn't given page numbers, Councillor Boyd?
It's a question that's come up during conversations with my other fellow councillors. It's back to the situations with ASBOs. After the dreadful situation over the weekend where an honesty box was smashed out or stolen in the outskirts of Carnoustie along with £60 worth of sweeties, some kids, and just trying to do a little bit of anyway, by the by. The situation is there an interaction between, because the guys were charged, they were found up in Forfar, and so the charge has gone ahead, but is there any interaction to putting an ASBO on the car? Because I remember years ago legislation came in to put ASBOs on cars. So I would love to think, and I know it'll probably come up in the next quarter when it actually becomes part of the crime thing, but the question is there anything where not only the person who caused the crime can be get a criminal record for it, but also something put on the car?
There can be, but only in very limited circumstances. So if the car is being driven in an antisocial way, we can ASBO the car effectively. It's not as simple, it's not quite how it sounds, and the driver of the car. So it means that if the idea being that if the car was swapped around between different drivers, so if the car is used in antisocial behaviour way by driver number 1, and the following night driver number 2 drives it in antisocial behaviour way, then the car can be taken possession of. We can remove that car from the second driver, even although it's only the first time they've done something. So stop the sort of, as we refer to in the scheme, runabout cars. So it's not heavily used. It's because we tend not to need to go down that route, but that's how it comes out. We can't just go taking people's cars off them just that easily, and rightly so. So there's ECHR article rights around punishment without due process, and just taking folks' cars off them is probably breaching that.
Yeah, but luckily you got the video of him showing that he was driving erratically, so there may be something that can be put on the car when he was trying to put the money box and dashing off and running.
Let's not get involved with individual cases, Councillor Boyd.
Okay, thank you, Alec.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
You hear me?
Yes.
I would like to go back to the cyclists. Now, I was out at the weekend, and on the B roads, the cyclists are riding 2 abreast. Now, when I was a young lad, you had to ride single file when there was a car coming. Now, and there was a queue, I'll bet you, half a mile long behind these cyclists. And they just didn't move. So are the police aware of that? Or?
Yeah, I think that the guidance for cyclists from some of their own lobbying groups is actually cycling 2 abreast is safer. It avoids close pass events. When they're cycling in single file, you tend to get a squeeze through between the oncoming vehicle and the cyclist. So it is actually a safety measure that some do. But all road users, cyclists, drivers, they need to drive. There needs to be a certain degree of consideration for other road users, and we do acknowledge that. But therein lies the challenge that we've got of why there were mixed views around Operation Close Pass, because not everybody is supportive of that most vulnerable of road user groups. So we are aware of the conflict, if that's the right phrase, between the motor vehicles and cyclists, but they both have an equal right to the road, and the cyclist is clearly more vulnerable. So there's extra attention paid to their vulnerability and what we can do to support that. But as in regards to cyclists cycling 2 abreast or single file, 2 abreast is now the norm. And certainly from our perspective, it reduces the potential for a close pass event.
Okay. Councillor Bell, you've got your hand up again.
Thank you. Yes, convener. I just want to come in the back of Councillor Bray's point about a wildlife crime, and I've had cause to call the police over threatening behaviour towards me personally in relation to wildlife crime, and I've also encouraged constituents to contact the police around what they feel is wildlife crime near them, and I have to say everyone has been treated with utter respect, and the incidents have been taken seriously. So again, I just wanted to thank officers locally for that, because it is quite intimidating to get that sort of behaviour from people with guns, having been on the receiving end of it.
Okay, if that's everything on the police report, do we agree to note it? Right, thank you very much. We'll say goodbye to you, Andrew, and Wayne for the rest of the afternoon. I think the fire services have already left us. If not, goodbye to them as well. And we'll proceed with the rest of the agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, we move on to internal audit activity update, item 6. Cathy Wiley, please.
Thank you. This is the information on the progress of the planned audit work and also the implementing of the recommendations that have been agreed. And also at the top of page 75, just a confirmation that by today there's been sufficient audit work undertaken for the year for me to be able to give my overall annual opinion, which will be in the next item that we'll come to on the agenda. So in terms of this report, we've got the tables which start on page 79, which indicate where we're at with all of the pieces of work that have been started this year. And from page 83, there are 3 pieces of work that we're reporting today that haven't been reported previously: property asset maintenance, interfaces, and the continuous auditing for the final quarter of the year. So if I come to the property asset maintenance process, this piece of work was looking at how we manage asset management plans, compliance with legislation, recording and accounting for assets, programme of condition surveys, risk assessment procedures, health and safety procedures, monitoring of contractors' performance, and also looking at the production of relevant, timely and accurate management information. And you'll see there that the overall level of assurance here is substantial assurance. And in the table that is on page 85, you can see that 6 of the 8 areas were assessed as green. And we only have 2 recommendations within this report. The first one is around a corporate asset management plan being reviewed and refreshed, and also the finalisation of the historic asset management policy, which is in progress. And there's a level 3 action around making sure that access to systems is terminated when people no longer require that access. We did identify a number of good practice areas in this, and also the service themselves have got a few planned areas for improvement, mostly around better use of IT to help them with the areas that they're covering. The next area that we looked at were interfaces, and this work was undertaken by Assets, and Paul Kelly is in the call, and I would like to ask him to present this section.
Okay, thanks, Cathy. Thanks, convener. Just as some context for this review was actually requested specifically by the ICT management. They were aware of issues relating to the management of interfaces, and they wanted the audit to validate this and to identify any key areas of risks and weakness in the process. I think it is worth saying as well that there was no perception that interfaces that are in place weren't working at all. So on page 88 of your papers, we set out our assessment. We've given a limited assurance rating for this report, with all 5 control objectives rated as amber. Just as one minor amendment, in agreeing the action plan for this report, we've actually removed 1 recommendation, so that comes down to 11, and rather there's now 1 priority 1, 9 priority 2, and 1 priority 3 issues. And moving to page 89 of the papers, I won't speak to all of these, but the main issue we identified was the priority 1 at the top of the page, where there's limited documentation of the design and operation of the interfaces for a number of council business systems that were in our scope. And that restricted our ability to perform audit testing of access controls, as well as the security of data in transit and at rest. And that weakness itself cascades into a number of the priority 2 recommendations. The only other one I'd pick up on is the second last priority 2 item. And just to highlight, a number of the issues we found was that a number of the interfaces have been in place for some time, some over being 20 years old, and very reliant on manual process and manual systems, with individuals being responsible rather than using automated tools to support the process. And that creates a risk in itself of relying on individuals, and if they leave, then you lose substantial knowledge of how they're designed. That was all I planned to say, and we'll hand over to Cathy for the remainder of the paper.
Okay.
Thank you. The final piece of work that we're talking about today is the continuous auditing of payroll and accounts payable for the period from January to March 2021. And this work looks at things like duplications and also large payments, and where there's been people who have both approved and authorised payments. And we haven't found any anomalies that weren't easily explained, and so we've got comprehensive assurance for this final period, and we've had comprehensive assurance on both of those for the whole of the year. So that's good. And the final section is around the implementation of audit actions, and just to say again, we're still seeing a steady progress with clearing some actions. We've only got a couple that are now from 2017-18, and the priority 2 item there is due to be finalised this month when financial regulations are presented. And that was all I was wanting to draw attention to, but obviously happy to answer any questions.
Okay, bids for questions. Councillor Devine.
Page 84 and 89.
Councillor Bell.
Page 86, please.
Okay, Councillor Devine, page 84.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not quite sure, Cathy, whether this is the right place to ask it, but I was wondering if you had managed to identify any clear strategies or plans for exiting buildings, given that we're hoping to dispose of some assets, well, hopefully in the near future. Was that something you were looking at or not?
No, we didn't. We didn't look at that specifically. I know that in a previous piece of work there was an action that was to be built into the process. My understanding is, from memory, that action is now complete, and that the process does include strategies being built into these processes, but I can check that and come back to you after this meeting. There may be someone else on the call that would be able to answer that, actually. I'm not sure.
Is that what you're coming in on, Mr. Cochrane?
Thank you, Convener. Devine. Yes, it's a previous action in terms of ensuring that we look at exit strategies for our property, and it is a forthcoming amendment to the financial regulations. It's an outstanding action awaiting the update on thin regs. So I hope that helps, Councillor Devine.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bell, page 86.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, the Badger database system, it's not a system I'm familiar with at all, but I was quite taken aback, for a council that talks about digital by default, that officers are still writing paper job forms and posting them to HQ, and it's hoped that in future these can be electronically scanned to the system. I would have thought that this would be quite a pressing improvement and development. I just wondered what the timescales were for this and how well it actually interfaces with existing systems in the council, and I guess why has it not been done yet? I hope somebody can help here, because I think officers must be just desperate to move out of the the 20th century.
Okay, again, that's something I'm not able to give you detail on, but I suspect someone else would be able to answer that.
Well, I think so. Can we refer that back, please, Cathy, to the appropriate part of the organisation for a reply to Councillor Bell?
Okay.
Can we move on, please? Councillor Devine, page 89.
Yeah, it's rare that we get so many priority twos, and obviously it's a very detailed area, and I mean, I have no idea about interfaces really, but I think what I'm wanting to know is get some assurance that at least some of these can be completed quite quickly. Clearly, the one where they've been in place for over 20 years, and again, relying on individuals themselves, I might take a bit longer, but are there some of these that can be done quite quickly, do you think, Paul?
I think Caroline and Sharon are maybe on the call, and they're maybe best placed to answer that about the pace of movement.
Yes. Hello, I'll take that one.
Okay, carry on.
Yes, some of it, but there's a long list of priority activities for IT, and it's really just a question of getting those to the top of the priority list. We have invested in some additional technology to help with this, and we've put some money in the carry forward for some resource to also accelerate this. So the timescales will be dependent on how quickly we can get those in place.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
If there's no more questions, we're asked to note this report. Is that agreed? Agreed, thank you. Let's move on to item 7. Internal Audit Annual Report, Review of Corporate Governance. Again, it's Cathy Wiley.
Okay, thank you. This is the report with my annual internal audit opinion included in it. And I want to just start on page 99, where we've got the information about my opinion and the basis of how that opinion was arrived at. Just going to draw attention to a few items within here around how I've arrived at the opinion, and also because the public sector internal audit standards do require me to bring certain things to your attention. So at the top of page 99, you can see that my opinion is that the Council has a framework of controls in place that provide reasonable assurance regarding the organisation's governance framework, effective and efficient achievement of objectives and the management of key risks, and proper arrangements are in place to promote value for money. Although we do obviously find some things that we have improvement actions put in place for around systems and the operation of controls, there are also a number of good practice areas identified and good internal controls. And I think it's worth drawing attention, if you look back at the table that is included in the previous report and also included in this report around the results of the pieces of work that we've undertaken, I would say that during 2021, the level of assurance that's been provided from audit work has improved on previous years. And I think that's really to be commended given the year that we've just come through. The other conclusion that I've got in here is around corporate governance, and the conclusion is that the local code of corporate governance, which obviously we're going to be speaking about later on today as well, is adequate and effective, and although there are some areas for improvement that have been identified, the code's complied with in all material respects. And I think in terms of the items that I've relied on in coming to my opinion, I previously spoke about the fact that we weren't able to get all of the audit work done. However, there have been a number of things that I've been able to rely on, and I just want to draw attention here just on page 100, just around my observations and knowledge of the Council's approach to recovery and change resulting from the COVID-19 impact and how that's been managed, and also the approach to the maintenance of governance and the control environment in managing the COVID-19 emergency has impacted on how, just to make sure that we were taking cognizance of the delays and other impacts of COVID-19 and also the changes in the risk profile of the Council. And at that point, instead of coming up with a fixed plan, I produced an audit pool, which I felt would give me the maximum flexibility to be able to undertake work this year to make sure that we maximise the amount of assurance that would be able to be provided by the time we got to this time in the year. And so I think that's worked reasonably well because I've been able to provide the limitation of scope. In addition to the audit work that's been undertaken this year, members of the internal audit and the counter fraud teams have been involved in providing advice around a number of new things that have happened in the guidance in response to COVID-19. And also the counter fraud team have been involved in COVID-19 response grants and looking at some of the potential fraudulent activity around that. And so although some of that planned audit work has not been completed, taking into account the conclusions from the work that has been done, the alternative sources that we've undertaken this year and previous year's results, I have been able to provide my opinion without any limitation of scope. And I think it's also worth noting at this point that my overview of the Council's response to the pandemic has continued to provide good positive assurance about our disaster recovery planning in practice and managers' awareness of the need to maintain good governance and change and the risk management arrangements. And there has been ongoing review of the COVID-19 driven arrangements throughout 2021 with action being taken to make changes where these have been required. So moving on to the main findings, were assessed as having been achieved with a number of areas and obviously where necessary, as you know, we've put in place action plans to make improvements around the control environments or to tighten up with the operation. And the tables that are there starting on page 104, yeah, it's 104, summarise all of the work that's been completed during this year. And then on page 109, we have a table which shows you other work which has been started during the year and isn't finished yet. Some of that work's in progress and will come to the next meeting. And I have been able to take reliance from the work that's been done so far in there in coming to my opinion, because there aren't any significant areas to be reported to you in any of that work in progress at this stage. And there are a number of some that have been put back into the audit pool for future consideration. There was only one area that was assessed in 2021 as having limited assurance, and that was around the interfaces, which we've just spoken about. And so I don't plan to say anything more about that beyond noting that the action plan is still under development for that, and we will bring back in the meeting. In terms of previous audits that have had limited assurance, there's been good progress in changes that have been agreed in the action plans there, and there are only 2 remaining actions to be completed relating to those. One of those is around rationalisation of policies and procedures in environmental health, which is due to be completed by August, and the production of the CCAP, which was due at the end of May. And both of those were delayed by COVID, and I'm not concerned in terms of the progress that's been made in addressing these. Moving on now to discharge of audit recommendations. As I've said already, there has been steady progress in moving on with these being completed, and we have seen some earlier years ones being finalised as well. I just want to draw attention at paragraph 35, where I've just noted we did extend the timeframes on a lot of the actions just because of everything last year. And so we do have a position where right now we've got 85% of the outstanding actions have had their original due dates extended. And that compares with 60% in June 2020 and 62% in June 2019. Again, I'm not particularly concerned with that because I understand the reason for it, but it is something that I'll keep under review, and obviously we'll be reporting on actions going forward. In terms of outstanding counter fraud actions, the percentage is actually reduced in terms of those that have exceeded their initial due date, but the numbers of actions agreed for counter fraud work are significantly less than those for internal audit. The SIOS require me to confirm independence of the internal audit team, and I can confirm that the staff members involved in each of the 2021 internal audit reviews were independent of the areas that were under review, and their objectivity was not compromised in any way. We've looked at corporate governance, and obviously I've given a conclusion around the effectiveness and adequacy of the local code. And I think it's worth noting that there has continued to be positive improvement around corporate governance areas during 2021. And the key ones for me that are most important are around moving on with actions that have been agreed around performance management information and risk management, and both of those have got further actions which will be undertaken in the coming year. And the final area just to comment on is just around COVID-19 recovery, which is being planned at both a strategic and an operation level. And I can see that there's work going on to make sure that the recovery activities are aligned with other work that's going on within the council to deliver the council plan, which should mean that there isn't going to be duplication there. In terms of the performance and quality assurance of the internal audit service itself, we're required to undertake a self-assessment every year, but every 5 years we need to get an external review undertaken to make sure that the activities that we're undertaking are in compliance with the public sector internal audit standards. And so Scottish Borders Council undertook that review during 2020. It was produced a little bit later than it should have been, which means we didn't meet the 5-year target that the standards impose on us, but obviously that was out with our own control. And in the appendix to this report, there is the summary of the 13 areas that they reviewed and the action plan that relates to that. We're fully conforming with the standards in 11 of the 13 criteria, and generally conforming in 2, which gives us an overall assessment of generally compliant with the standards, which is equivalent to the substantial assurance that we would provide ourselves on the services within the council. And the improvement plan has 2 actions. One is around assurance mapping, which is about making sure that we understand all of the assurances that are available to committees and the council and officers, so that we can focus our internal audit in the areas where there might be some gaps, and also around the council implementing the final stages of its risk management strategy. That's mainly around getting service risk registers up and running, and also we've just reinstated the reporting to the Scrutiny and Audit Committee around risk, which had been absent for a bit of time. And you'll be pleased to know there's not an awful lot yet that I need to speak to you about, but the one bit is just around the membership of our team. The team is stable this year, the same as it was last year. We have one member of the counter fraud team who is a temporary appointment, and that's been extended for a further year up until May 2022. During the year, we had 2 members of our team who were seconded and redeployed into the council's emergency centre, and that obviously had an impact on the work that we were unable to undertake. We had 42 days of counter fraud work and 168 days of internal audit work that were not able to be undertaken as a result of that, and it did significantly impact on being able to complete the 2021 planned work. However, in paragraph 59 on page 114, we are reporting an efficiency indicator that shows that the section discharged 92% of the planned productive hours, compared with 107% in previous years. When we tried to estimate what that figure might have been if we hadn't have lost that audit time, the figure came out at 105%, so it was roughly similar to last year. And that reduction was due to the redeployment to the emergency centre. And that's everything that I wanted to draw to your attention, so happy now to just answer any questions that you've got.
Okay, bids for questions? No one want to ask any questions? In that case, do we agree to note the report? Agreed?
Good. Thank you.
Item 8 is the corporate governance, and I call upon Margot Williamson to take this one.
Thank you, Convener. This report advises Committee of the outcome of the review of the Local Code of Corporate Governance and lays before members the revised Local Code for approval. The report supports the Council's commitment to the principles of good governance. Governance are listed in 4.1 A to G. As the Chief Executive, I am responsible for providing you with assurances annually that our approach to corporate governance is both appropriate and effective. The report that follows, item 9, does that. The revised code for approval starts on page 122 and outlines our key policies of compliance and evidences our coverage matrix, ending on page 136. Happy to take any questions.
Bids for questions on item 8. Councillor Devine.
120 and 129, please.
Okay, anyone else? Right, Councillor Devine, page 120.
Yeah, it's looking at the A to G. In C, it says defining outcomes in terms of sustainable economic, social and environmental benefits. Whether consideration has been given, as the climate change MOG has actually asked for, that there should be some kind of environmental impact or climate change impact on reports that we have to decide upon. I mean, given that the climate emergency is with us, and I know that the Council is very well aware of that, I just feel that this would give us some feeling that we are really aware of the decisions that we are taking and what the impact is going to be.
To you, Convener.
Yes,
Councillor Devine, I welcome that. I think that's a really good suggestion that we should include. And certainly, I know that the Climate MOG have been looking at all sorts of things in relation to climate change, but I would also like to bring that further up our general agenda, particularly as COP26 is not far away in Glasgow. So I like to say that over the next few weeks, months, you will see more actions and activity highlighting what we're doing as a council to respond to this as best we can.
Thank you.
On page 159, 29, I should say.
29 is, yes, it's the very first bit about locality implementation partnerships, and you probably won't be amazed to hear me say this, but we now have an example from East Ayrshire of plans, really good action plans, and I don't really think that our locality plans do anything like that, and I don't feel that there are enough people involved. And this kind of, I don't know whether it's chicken or egg, but PB has the opportunity to bring people together and perhaps get more involved in action plans for their locality, or if we had better action plans, we would get more involvement with participatory budgeting. I would really welcome your thoughts on that.
Again, through you, Convener, a very good point, Councillor Devine. As you'll be aware, myself and corporate leadership team presently are looking at the portfolios of the directors as a result of a retirement in communities. And part of the reason for doing a detailed look at that, and we'll be bringing a paper to the next council meeting, is really to focus much more on how do we support and lead and empower neighbourhoods, localities, and get these action plans that you're looking for. So again, I would agree with you, there's more work to be done, and it's something that you will see in terms of leadership of that agenda when we bring that paper in June. And from there, we'll progress to working probably similar. I mean, certainly East Ayrshire is a very good model to follow. It'll take us a little while to get to that stage, but certainly in terms of the principles that they are using, we would like to use these too.
Okay. Thank you. That's very good news. That's going to be some meeting in June.
Well, it is indeed.
Is there anyone else? If not, we're asked to approve this report. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 9, again, it's you, Margot.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, this report outlines the outcome of our annual review of good governance compliance. This is informed by the Corporate Governance Officers Group, who carry out our annual self-evaluation as described in the Local Code of Corporate Governance. Our 2021 action plan is included with the annual governance statement, and you will note the 4 continued actions from 2020-2021 and the extension of 2 of these. This was largely to do with the exceptional year that we've had, with the workforce diverted to other matters. A summary of the impact of COVID-19 is included in Appendix 1. Committee is asked to consider the Statement of Assurance and actions to be taken forward this year. Committee is also asked to note that this statement will be presented with the Council's unaudited accounts to the Controller of Audit, and committee should note this draft will be kept under review and updated as necessary in advance of that being presented with the unaudited accounts. Again, Convener, happy to take any questions on this.
Right, the first one's from me. I noted on pages 150, 153 and 154 that mention dates and reports which don't seem to have been held yet. Is that just a provision for the future so that once it is updated, it can be fitted in?
It is indeed, Convener. There's a number of bits that are to be completed because it is the draft, and there won't be any significant or material changes, so there's no harm in committee approving this draft, but that's indeed the reason it's for to include the relevant dates. Right, bids, Councillor Bell?
Page 167, please, Convener.
Anyone else? Councillor Bell, page 167.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Margot. It was just in relation to the whistleblowing policy, and a note that a draft has been submitted to a few key stakeholders there. Having just signed off one for a special health board, there's quite a wide disparity between that one and the existing council one, and I wondered what you found when you compared it with the integration perspective. And I guess I'm thinking about the awful Post Office Horizon situation that has just kind of found in favour of the postmasters and around support for things like distress, suicide awareness, and for the staff who are dealing with some very difficult and complex situations if it gets to the stage of whistleblowing. And I just wondered if that had been considered in the drafting of the new policy.
Through you, Convener, I don't have the exact details on that, but I could draw on someone else within the call. But what I would say is part of the reason for delaying this, and this is one of the actions that has been carried over, is to ensure that we are taking into account a number of cases like the ones you've just raised, so that we are covered with that within our whistleblowing policy. We already have a whistleblowing policy, as you would be aware. So anyone who was to bring anything forward that even roughly sat under that, we would deal with it anyway. But we are updating it, and it will take that into account. I see Kathy's got her hand up. She probably has a bit more detail to support that for you, Councillor Bell. Kathy?
Yeah, Ewan, I think, is in the call, and he might want to add something to what I'm going away to say. But yeah, we've reviewed the policy, and part of the reason for reviewing that was because we were aware of the significant changes that had been undertaken in reviewing the equivalent in the health area, and we thought there were some really good ideas in there that we didn't have in our policy. So it's been about trying to incorporate those where they're appropriate. And also I'm aware that there's been a review of whistleblowing around what happens in the Health and Social Care Partnership, and we want to try and make that tie together better. So that's been another part of what we've looked at. Ewan's got a bit more detail and might be able to answer the second part of your question, because I'm not sure how far we've gone into that, but it might be something, because we haven't finished this yet, that we might want to consider further. Ewan, have you got anything else to add?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, invested to see that document, Councillor Bell. What I've been doing so far is trying to incorporate the recommendations of the Independent National Whistleblowing Officer, and it's moving towards these protections. but I'd be absolutely keen not to miss anything out as far as that was concerned. So yeah, I'd be keen to see that further if that's possible.
I'll absolutely send that to you. It's been signed off. Thanks, Ewan.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. There are no more further questions. We're asked to note and approve. No, we're not. We're yes, we are. We're asked to note and approve this. Is that agreed? Thank you. Let's move on to item 10, which is the corporate counter fraud review report. Kathy Wiley, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I am. Sorry, we was being second. Yeah, so this is just a review of the work that's been undertaken by the counter fraud team during the year, and if we're on page 171 there, just a little bit in background there, the SIPA fraud and corruption tracker for 2020 report indicated that the main types of external fraud that are facing local authorities are in council tax, housing, disabled parking and business rates. And if I go into then the overview of the work that's been undertaken by the counter fraud team, obviously I've spoken a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 already in terms of the overall internal audit annual report that I've presented. But the restrictions did have an impact on the fraud team in terms of them being able to go out and undertake some of the investigatory meetings and other data matching work that they would have undertaken. And also, as I've already said, one member of the team was seconded to the emergency centre for a short period of time. And the counter fraud team did get involved in a number of new things that wouldn't have been done previously around COVID-19 and looking at some of the procedures and processes that were being put in place. But I think primarily a good part of the work that they've undertaken has been around working with colleagues in other areas to look at the business support grant scheme and the strategic framework business fund, which obviously we've reported previously to this committee, and where we have identified a small number of potentially fraudulent claims which have been passed on to police and are active inquiries at the moment. And the other areas that we've worked on have been the corporate frauds. During the year there were 5 corporate frauds that were concluded, and they were looking mostly at things around theft of council property, missing monies from council premises and unjustified enhanced salary payments. And there were 3 cases that were ongoing at the 31st of March. We've also provided advice to various services throughout the year when they've come to us for advice around fraud issues. In terms of council tax, which is one of the key areas that SIPA have highlighted, we do undertake internal data matching that allows us to make sure that where people are claiming discounts for their council tax, these are still reasonable and should still be in place. And we've also looked at data matching with an external provider to do further matches around council tax, and the internal work has provided us with just under £34,000 worth of discounts that we've been able to reclaim, and also the external work is just over £30,000 worth of discounts and exemptions that have been removed. The other significant piece of work that we undertake every 2 years is the National Fraud Initiative. The information has been put in and the matches came back early in 2021, and that work is ongoing at the moment in terms of reviewing the matches and investigating where necessary. We also undertake work when we're requested to with the DWP to assist in some of their investigations, and that work's identified just over £9,000 of fraud and error in housing benefit and council tax. The next bit's the whistleblowing, which I would have talked about, but I think we've probably covered that already, so I'll just go past that. Obviously, the counter fraud team will be continuing to work if necessary around COVID-19 areas. There's all the National Fraud Initiative work to be getting on with. We need to finalise the whistleblowing policy and take forward proactive matches where we can, and just raise awareness around counter fraud activity as much as possible going forward. I think just to conclude, if I look at the financial implications that are at the bottom of page 173, I've already mentioned the 65,000 that had been brought back from investigation work and the 9,000 from the work with the DWP, but there were also there was also £73,500 worth of business grant support grants that we identified were potentially fraudulent before they were paid out, and we were able to prevent them from being paid out. So that was a good piece of work. But we have Ewan in the call, as you know, and if I'm not able to answer any questions, then he'll be able to come in.
Okay, any bids for questions? No bids. We're asked to note this. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, item 11 is you again, Cathy.
Okay. This is the report around where Angus Council's controls are around issues that previously Audit Scotland had reported there had been issues in other councils. I did draw your attention to the Audit Scotland publication in August, but this is us now bringing back just a position statement in terms of where Angus Council's systems are. On page 188, the first two columns in the table there are from the Audit Scotland report around the frauds that were undertaken elsewhere and the weaknesses that allowed them to happen. And the final column is Angus Council's position in terms of our procedures and any recent work that's been undertaken in these areas by counter fraud or internal audit. I'm not particularly concerned about any of these areas for the council, and therefore I'm not intending to draw attention to any of this, but obviously happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for item 11? No request for questions. We're asked to note this report. Is that agreed? Agreed, thank you. Item 12, Gordon Cargill, change programme.
Thanks, Convener. This is the quarterly change programme update report, previously considered also at Policy and Resources on the 4th of May. This report sets out progress with the change programme since agreement at the budget setting meeting in March. A number of savings identified in the report already delivered. These are also highlighted in blue in Appendix 1, which also sets out all the various projects. The report sections 4.3 and 4.4 also identifies the main areas of risk at this stage with a short narrative around each, and obviously these areas of risk are being closely monitored and will be reported on as we move forward in the next update. The report also highlights, I think this is important, that the change programme is not only about savings, that it is also a full portfolio of programmes and projects that provide investment and enable change to happen across the council. So we've included a few links in the report to ensure that members, I know you've seen many of these reports before, but it's quite nice to have them all in the one place, so you have an overview to see the full scale of the programme that's moving forward and the amount of change that's happening across the organisation. Section 4.6 of the report would just highlight that the importance of the benefits realisation aspect of change and the work that we are progressing to try and improve our reporting around that aspect of the change programme as well. The latest governance arrangements supporting our change programme at officer level are included in Appendix 2 for review by members, and these were agreed, updated and agreed by the Change Board at its meeting in December. There's also an update in the report around how we're moving forward to develop our change programme. Section 6 of the report refers and how we start to develop detailed plans to address the £9 million target savings that we have identified against the 4 themes noted in the report. Finally, the report gives an update on the current financial position and spend and balances on the change fund and also the Cities Deal Fund. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions on item 12? No questions. We're asked to note this. Do we agree to note?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Convener, can I stand up?
Oh, I missed that. A bit slow.
Sorry, just a quick one, convener. Thanks. Thank you, Gordon. I note in the paper that the further service reviews are currently being discussed just now, and you're looking at 226,000 and then 500k thereafter. What's the timescales for completing that discussion? When might we see that appear in a bit more detail in the paperwork? Because it does seem quite a bit without any of that detail at this stage.
Yeah, Councillor Bell, thanks for the question. I think that's an area that we're working with the Change Board on. It's an area of risk that we've flagged up within the report. Obviously, you're clocking that as well, and it's something that we're working through at the moment. We don't have the detail on those service reviews at the moment, but it's obviously something that will have to come forward very quickly now in order to deliver this on that this year. So we're actively looking at that as we speak.
Okay. Otherwise, we agree to note the change programme.
Agreed.
Thank you. Agreed. Item 13 is the local government benchmarking. Gordon, I think that's you again.
It is indeed, convener. This report is to make the committee aware of the local government benchmarking framework overview report for 1920. I would stress it's for 1920, which was the period pre-COVID. And the report also has an update on the council's performance-led programme and how that's progressing. I think this is a really important annual report for the council to be aware of and look at and use as a tool to consider how we are performing against our family group of authorities. It links very closely with our performance-led council programme and our work that's important around making better use of our data. It is only one of a range of data sets that services use for performance management purposes, but it's one that the information in it is becoming better as we move forward through the years, and it's therefore an important one for us to be aware of and acknowledge and take account of as we look to improve service areas. This year, the main national report, we've only put it in as a hyperlink this year because it's quite an enormous report and has massive amount of detail. So to cut down on that level of detail in the papers, and although the report, I acknowledge also there's still a fair bit of information even in this report, it is mainly focused now on the Angus position across the 9 service groupings that are in the LGBF report. The report does, however, also have a brief overview of the national context, which I also think was quite important to put in there. And also a section of predicted post-COVID impacts moving forward. So just in terms of what the things we might need to look for in terms of performance and such like that COVID has had an effect and change things as we move forward, and things we need to think about in terms of recovery and renewal. So the report is helpful in that regard. Section 4 of the report sets out the key messages, though, for Angus across the 9 service groupings, and there is further detail in the analysis that's been carried out in Appendix 1. Section 5 of the report also gives a progress update, as I've mentioned already, on our performance-led programme, which was halted for a period of time as well through COVID, but we're now back up and running with that programme, and it's now also tailored towards doing it through a more digital virtual means rather than face-to-face workshops and such like. So that's moved forward as well to allow us keep the improvement agenda moving forward. The final point I would just make in terms of the report was just to say that services where there's been obviously relevance to service work in the various 9 groupings, the services themselves have been involved in developing the report and putting in feedback as to how they're responding to the various issues that have been arisen through the report. I'm happy to take any questions, convener.
Right, bids for questions. Councillor Devine.
Yeah, 217 218, 221 and 222, Convener. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Whiteside?
Thanks, Convener. 217, 218, 221. If any of the questions are the same as Councillor Devine, I'll not answer. Ask them.
Councillor Duff?
Yeah, I would just echo Councillor Whiteside's comments, but I had points in 221, 224 and 227, but I obviously won't duplicate questions.
Right. I may have to go and answer the door. Could you just take a note of these page numbers so you can continue? Councillor Devine, 217, 218, 221, 223.
222.
222, I beg your pardon, by my bad writing. Councillor Whiteside, 217, 218 and 221. And yourself, 221, 224 and 227. It's just that it's gone past 4 o'clock and I'm expecting my daughter to arrive shortly.
Okay.
You're still muted, Bill.
I'd like a general comment at the end, please, Alex. Convener.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Devine, 217.
Yeah, thank you, Gordon. You're not wrong when you say there's a lot of information in here. Take some reading, but some of my questions are quite basic, really. Page 217 is the business of satisfaction with schools, and it has fallen 4%. I was just really wondering whether that is parent satisfaction with schools or community satisfaction, because I seem to remember in the past there was a variance there, that parents actually thought more of their schools than the community did. So I'd just be interested to know what that refers to, if you know that.
I don't know it directly, but I wonder if Kelly McIntosh is on the call, she might have the answer and know that.
Yes, thank you. I think that measure is about the community that the school serves, so the whole community and not just the children and the parents who attend that school. Obviously, we have our own information from schools that we'll look at in terms of complaints or concerns that are raised and the number of meetings that we have to support children, and we gather feedback from parents there about the schools. So I would like to say that actually parental satisfaction is higher than that from the information, the detailed information that we have from our schools.
It usually is.
Okay. I know Sandu Kars is starting to come in.
Yes, thank you. Just to provide a bit of clarification on that actual indicator, just to highlight that it's taken from the Scottish Household Survey and highlights the satisfaction over a 3-year average on the percentage of adults who think they are satisfied or very satisfied with local schools. So obviously the sample for Angus will be quite small in terms of that context of that indicator. So it may be why there may be a difference in terms of variation. And as Kelly has already indicated, the information and data held at a local level will be more useful in terms of them developing their improvement for that area.
Thank you. Has that covered your point, Councillor Whiteside?
No, I've got another one.
Okay, 2017 then.
Thank you. It was regarding the sentence about the Angus education plan focusing on the achievements of children who are care experienced. Obviously, this is a hugely important area to focus on, but I'm just a bit confused about the wording. It kind of implies that they're not focusing on every child. So I wonder if it should maybe read increased focus on the achievements of children who are care experienced.
Okay, is it okay for me to take that?
Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, Councillor Whiteside, you're quite right. When I read that back, it's clumsy. What I was trying to point out was that the data that we have about the outcomes for our care experienced children are not where we would want them to be. And as you know, our annual education plan this year had a statement in it that assured everyone that we would be supporting our care experienced young children, obviously as well as everyone else, but with much more of a focus than normal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, you're on have the floor, Councillor Whiteside. You have a one on 218?
1-8, yes. I was just a wee bit surprised people being helped into work by a council programme. It's fallen quite a lot and it's the 4th lowest. So I was wondering if there was a specific reason for that. Maybe a programme had come to the end or something. And similarly on that page, the vacancy rates in town centre is consistently above average, yet our ECDEV spend is the lowest. Is this something that we have addressed or we should address going forward? Thanks.
Anyone going to take that one?
Convener, could I just come in on the back of that last point being made? Because I'm aware that in some councils there are town centre development officers, and you kind of feel that if we'd had a town centre development officer, when we'd had the grants for town centre regeneration, it could have been handled by that person and it would have been so much easier, because it's been a difficult process. I absolutely understand that. So I just wonder if that is something that we should really be considering going forward, being a go-to place for business.
Is that your question on that page, is it?
Well, I have actually the next sentence or two where I think we have to thank the people working in economic development amazingly, because they're working under incredible strictures of very low money being spent on development and tourism. So between the Angus Tourism Cooperative and the ECDEV department, I think they've done a really good job. I know it's not a question, really.
Yes. Have we got an officer that's going to respond to that? We don't have any officers. Perhaps you could arrange for a response to Councillors Whiteside and Devine on that, Gordon, please.
Yes, we'll pick up these points, Convener.
Right, okay, can we proceed to page 221, Councillor Devine?
Convener, sorry, can I interrupt? Vivian Smith has her hand up, so I'm not too sure if she's wanting to respond to that question.
I'm not seeing it, but anyway, carry on. Vivian?
Thanks, Convener. I was going to come in. I did have my hand up, but certainly there are a few points there. I think the notable one being around economic development service and the overall amount that we spend as a council. But I think the reports that you all see on a regular basis coming up demonstrates that we absolutely are delivering as a council in relation to economic growth and jobs, etc. And a lot of that work is linked in with Taste Cities as well. However, Margot mentioned earlier about looking at how we might be looking around portfolios, and again something will come forward in June time around that, which links also to the point in relation to town centres and what we're doing within localities. It's about trying to see how we might improve on these areas in a way that's going to lead to stronger towns and stronger business and jobs. I hope that helps.
I look forward to seeing that. That'd be good.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Devine, page 221.
Yes, it's the worrying bit about trading standards having declined dramatically. I know this has been over several years, and environmental health. And again, we really need to thank the staff for working, especially through the pandemic. These people have been really amazing. I just feel that we really do have to look at this, because we have raised this question, I think, in Scrutiny and Audit before about environmental health officers. And when you look at page 224, there is a concern raised about increased reserves. And sometimes you just have to wonder if this resource could be used differently. These are backroom services which we tend to forget about, but they are absolutely vital. You can see that in all the scams that we've been talking about this afternoon with the police. and the pandemic has certainly shown how vital environmental health is. So I just want that to be noted, really. Thank you.
Councillor Whiteside, is that the same point as you wanted to raise?
Yes, it is. Thanks.
Councillor Duff, you had it.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yeah, I had a point in 221, and I guess it's the first item on roads, and we did have a fair old discussion about this on communities a week or so ago about our dropping down the league table and taking 194 years to resurface our roads. And I guess this is just indicating what we were saying at the previous meeting, that our spend has been reduced, and we now say that we continue to manage decline of the road network condition, which I think is a fairly sobering message to give to the citizens of Angus. It's certainly it's fairly clear we aren't spending enough money, despite the best efforts of our road staff, and I've always continued to praise them because I think they do a great job, but they do a great job with the money they get, and I think clearly we need to try and find more money to keep our roads, or at least maintain the standard and not be. That's really more a comment than a question, I guess.
Yes. Right. Is there anything further on? Oh, wait a minute now. On page 221. No, I don't think so. Page 222, Councillor Devine.
Yes, again on the last bit about invoices, we seem to have gone way down on payment of invoices, but I think that might be historical, because I'm sure that Mr. Lorimer told us that when the pandemic struck, we started paying invoices much more quickly. And so I would really like to know if that is the situation now. Otherwise, there really should be some kind of improvement action noted, which there isn't.
Mr. Lorimer, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, thank you, Convener, councillors. Yeah, this is one where I think the answer actually lies in one of the projects within our change programme. One of the lines in there is a purchase to pay project, which we've been working on. And that project is really about modernising and digitalising the process, the end-to-end process, from making a purchase order to actually making the payment to the supplier and bringing automation to that. That would avoid the sort of situations which can cause delays in making payments to our suppliers. We have, as a general policy for quite a period now, been paying as soon as an invoice is authorised on the system. It goes out in the next payment run. But the problem that can arise in relation to that is how quickly the invoice is received from the supplier and then authorised through the system. The payment bit is the end. It's getting the invoice approved through the system for payment that can sometimes take a bit of time. As I say, the purchase to pay, we're already in test now with the new modules that we've bought as part of our purchase to pay process. We're testing that currently with our parks team. So we did our first test invoice, test order on that. Some progress on that purchase to pay project, which I think once that is fully deployed will make a big difference to this particular indicator and how quickly we get suppliers paid.
Okay.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Councillor Duff, page 224. You're on mute, Bill.
No, I 224 again. I guess it would just be a comment. I mean, we've made this at other meetings that the council is consistently underspent on budget, and I think that's flagged up. I think that's a matter that we've raised continually on projects, on capital monitoring, etc. Just again a comment from me about that.
Okay, and page 227.
No, that must be a mistake. I don't have a comment on 227.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brays, you had a general comment?
Yes, well, just to say, Convener, there is a huge amount of information in this, and a lot of it really useful information. And if you follow the links, you come into even more information, which is, and I could we could spend another afternoon talking about all that's in it, but a lot of the questions I would ask aren't really relevant to this agenda, I don't think. But I will be trying to find a way of getting this onto my desktop for future reference. Thanks.
Can I suggest that you contact IT to help you with that? Somebody from IT is listening. Can you make sure that Councillor Brays has a way of getting that from his Surface Pro onto his desktop?
Thank you very much, Convener.
Pick that up.
Right, in that case, if there's no other comments, we're asked to note this report. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 14 is the Scrutiny and Audit Committee self-assessment and annual report. Cathy, please.
Thank you. This is the draft of the annual report, which you as a committee will take up to the council, just summarising the work that's been undertaken this year. And the report starts on page 232. And it summarises the work that's been done and includes various items that good practice would say should be included in this kind of report around attendance at meetings and training, etc. And it also includes the results from the self-assessment work that was done on the 29th of April, measuring against some of the SIPFA good practice for audit committees, and you'll see the scoring is there on page 235. It's not against last year because we didn't undertake this last year because the meeting was cancelled, but the scores, when you look at them against what was scored 2 years ago, there's quite a bit of movement there, which is good to note. Appendix in here has got the action plan from the previous, well, 2 years ago. There's one action that's carried forward into the new action plan, and the action plan is there from page 238 onwards in terms of the things that we agreed at the self-assessment meeting. This is an opportunity for any members who think we've missed anything or misinterpreted anything to ask us to change these actions. Some of this work's already been started, but obviously if there's anything you think is missing from that, then we can add that in. And Appendix B is the remit of the committee with a summary of the various reports that have come to the committee that would go towards discharging that part of the remit. And that's really all I want to say about this, I think.
Thank you, Cathy. Any questions on item 14? No questions. We're asked to note this report. Do we agree to note it? Is that agreed?
Sorry, Councillor Duff has his hand up.
Sorry?
Councillor Duff has his hand up. I don't know if it's a long
sorry,
stand.
I see his hand up.
Apologies, it's a legacy hand.
Oh, apologies, thanks.
I thought. Okay, thank you. Item 15 is the regulation of investigatory powers. I call Jackie Buchanan, please.
Thank you, Convener. You'll see that the purpose of this report is just to advise members on the use of surveillance powers by the Council in terms of RIPSA in the period from January through to the end of March. And it's simply to note that there was no authorisations granted for surveillance.
Excuse me, Jackie. Bill, can you take this one, please? That's my doorbell just gone.
Okay, yes, just carry on, please. Yep.
Thank you. Just to confirm that there was no authorisations granted for surveillance and other investigatory activities during the period, but we'd undertaken to update regardless, and so that's why the report's been brought, just to confirm that.
Okay, any questions for Mrs. Buchanan? Okay, I don't see anyone. Okay, noted, I think. Thank you very much. And move on to item 16, which is, again, I think Mrs. Buchanan, again, item 16.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. This is the annual complaints performance report being brought to members, simply to inform them of the complaint statistics for this year 2020 to 2021. It also has a bit of detail about the new SBSO framework, which was introduced nationally from the 1st of April 2021. The SBSO, of course, requires councils to publish an annual complaints report and also publish now quarterly complaints, outcomes and actions taking to improve services performance. You'll see from paragraph 4, that in the current year 2020 to 2021, Angus Council received a total of 256 complaints, and that's actually down from 369 in the previous year. The report then goes on to provide the detail of closed complaints, both at stage 1, where the majority of complaints were, and stage 2. 5.3 of the report details the complaints upheld, partially upheld and not upheld. The report then goes under 5.5, details the number and percentage of complaints at each stage which were closed in full within the set timeframes. There was then those that had an extension granted, that's also detailed. Paragraph 5.7 relates to customer satisfaction, and we have in fact a new online system for complaints, and at the moment we cannot online deal with the customer satisfaction aspect, but we're doing a workaround at the moment with the hope that we can in turn have an online aspect to this requirement as soon as possible, and we'll come back to the committee on that. 5.8 details some examples of learning from complaints, and those are narrated 1 to 3. And happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Right, any questions for Mrs. Buchanan there? I've see a hand up there now. I can't see who it is, but
it's me, Bill, Jules.
All right, okay. Councillor Bell, on you go.
Yeah, it's not a page number specifically, but I just wondered if you could share any information on the number of complainants involved in these complaints, presumably protecting any confidentiality. Is that possible to be reported on?
Could I just ask through yourself, Councillor Duff, Councillor Bell, in terms of that, do you mean that if it's a group complaint, is that, or if it's one from more than one party, or?
Well, any of those options, but I was thinking of more than one party submitting a number of claims, if that would be possible, say for example over 5.
I see.
That kind of thing.
If I could bring in my colleague, Mrs. Whitted, she may be able to, she's more au fait with the system, and she may be able to tell you if that's possible. She did ask to come into the meeting, so I'm presuming that she has managed to get in. Mrs. Whitted.
Good afternoon, councillors.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? Good afternoon, councillors. The system does not allow us to pull that out, but we could do something with IT to see if it's possible to identify. The system gives everyone an individual. Yes, you are right, there are a number of individuals who submit several complaints. So yes, we could look to pull that out for you.
Coming in on that one.
Just for the record of people putting in more than one complaint, but there may well be patterns of, underlying issues there that might be interesting to deal with holistically. But thanks, Elaine.
Yes, if I can come in, Bill. The other aspect, of course, is multiple complaints, which are all about the same thing. They would all be logged as individual complaints, and it might be a single problem.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we've got Councillor Whiteside with a question as well.
Really, I found the table at the top of page 256 a little bit harder to read than some of the others. It would have been quite useful to have the 2 years side by side rather than below each other, but that's a bit pedantic, sorry.
I don't think it is pedantic because it's been done in 5.4 and 5.5.
Certainly through yourself, convener, we can take that comment on, Councillor Whiteside, and note that for future reports. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I think we're just asked to note this report. So is that noted?
Great.
Okay,
Great.
I think. Do you want to finish the meeting off, Alex?
Yes, I'll just finish the meeting. It's taken quite a bit longer than I expected, but however, that's good scrutiny. So thank you very much for your input, everybody, and we will see you no doubt the next time round. So good afternoon. I will go and join my daughter and her dog.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
convener.
Thank you.
Bye.